Friday, everybody.
That's right, huh? I
That's
forgot.
right, man. This is Phreology Friday, the Good Friday edition. I'm Derrick Day, and he is
I am Aaron Tomlinson. Glad to be here.
good to be here, man. Always good to see your bright, shiny face, man. Uh,
Thank you.
High point of my week.
Likewise. Same for me.
Yep. So, before we get too far down the path, what's in the glass, my man?
I am just drinking red wine, Merlot, tonight.
Okay. Well, I'm drinking Glenlivet,
Mm,
and this is rum cask. So it's
mm,
been aged in cask that once held Caribbean rum,
mm.
and it imparts a nice uh, caramel flavor to it,
That,
and
that
it
sounds
makes it,
amazing.
yeah, it's actually pretty good. So
Yeah.
this one won't go into the phreology mixology book because it's just it's just straight booze, but we'll put recommendations for the kinds of straight booze that we like to drink as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I need to get to work on that. I'm motivated to do that. I am. I just got to
Well,
find the
I
time.
have something to share with you, and I'll share that. I mean, it's like offline, but
Yeah.
I've been kind of working on some chapters for the phreology book,
Ah, awesome.
and so I have some. I actually have some material that I want to share with you for your review.
Cool.
So that's the exciting news I have for the week. So, but the mixology book, I think that's something that's something pretty easy. We just need to go back and review some of the drinks that we've had and compile those into a book.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
with that being said, being that it's Good Friday and this is the day that Christianity typically celebrates the crucifixion of Jesus, and uh, I, I'm kind of how can I say it? Maybe this is a reach. Maybe it's a reach. Maybe it's a stretch. I don't know. But I'm going to try it anyway. I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah.
That there are things that, I mean, we're spiritual beings. We are, as we used to preach it back in the good old days, we are spirits with a soul living in a body, right? Triune being.
Hmm.
And that spirit, it's not just, we can get into the quantum physics of it and just say, okay, well, this is just energy resident in this vessel. But I think that that's like a gross reductionism.
Hmm.
That and I think that humanity is more than that, because I think that the spirit is the expression of universal consciousness that lives in this organic being, this
Hmm.
organic body.
Yeah.
And so just like this organic body, in order for it to be sustained and to survive, we have to feed it. And if we don't feed it good food, the body will get sick and it'll die,
Hmm.
right? So you go from being functional to being dysfunctional, or from being at ease to being diseased, right?
Right.
And likewise, the spirit being has to be fed too. And this is something that I'm learning because, um, as I've talked, we've shared this before. I've gone from being a Christian to being, grace camp, to being inclusionist, to being universalist, to being atheist, and now I see myself as like an agnostic anti-theist. That's kind of like where I like to say that the camp that I'm in right now, or where I'm pitching my tent for right now, and
Mhm.
that's subject to change. I reserve the right to grow and to change.
Yeah. Right.
But what I'm learning is that if you neglect the spiritual part of yourself, you do so at your own peril. And I think that, and this may upset some of my atheist friends. I don't believe that you have to believe in a God to do this. I don't believe that there has to be an object of worship or anything like that. But I think that you have to acknowledge that there's something to you that's part of you that's not physical.
Hmm.
And whether you call that spirit, whether you call that consciousness, whether you call that sentient energy, whatever you want to call it, at some point you have to feed it. You have to give it something to sustain its energy. Otherwise, you wind up starving it. And so what I wanted to get into tonight, Aaron, are things that we can do to feed
Hmm.
the spirit and things that happen in life that happen to starve the spirit. Because this is so I'm going to say this and I'm going to kick it over to you
Sure.
because you know the things that I've gone through like in the last year
Hmm.
and you know them, personally and in detail. But what I've learned is that if you neglect that spiritual side of yourself, you'll feel a hollowness, an emptiness.
Hmm.
And that emptiness will result in a lot of different manifestations. But the two most common ones are either anger
Yeah.
or depression.
Yeah.
Because imagine if your body is starved, then you go to starvation and you go to wasting, right? And I think that what was happening to me in the last year is that I was spiritually wasting.
Mm.
And
Interesting.
so I've found ways to feed my spirit man,
Hmm.
and the ways that I've done it, they don't involve religion, they don't involve any God, they don't involve any supreme being. Now, and here's the thing: for those of you who believe that, if that's where you are, that's cool, right?
Hmm.
If you find something there that feeds you, I've learned to be nice and not knock it. Okay. So I just want to say that. So, Aaron, with that, I'm going to kick it over to you, my friend.
Yeah, I think so. Just to lay a foundation for it, where I've been on the, this journey, this map. Um, I, you know, I keep going back. For me, 2020 was a very pivotal year
Yeah.
because I'd already more or less deconstructed from all the crappy doctrines. I didn't believe in penal substitution anymore since Good Friday, right? I didn't believe that God
Yep.
had to bloody sacrifice his son so he could feel better about us. That was one of the first things to go. And then I didn't believe in hell anymore, so I, like you, embraced universalism. I embraced grace really early on. I was never very legalistic when it came to that kind of stuff. Um, and then I had opened up myself to other traditions in the New Age movement, the Eastern philosophies, even though I didn't spend a lot of time with them. But, coming from the Christian idea that we've got it and we're superior, and the whole Trinitarian view, right, puts
Yeah.
the Christian on top of every other circumstance or religion. And so when I was researching all of that stuff and just exploring all of that stuff, I was still having very dynamic spiritual experiences, right?
Yep.
Up into 2020. And then this anti-science thing that happened, not just among fundamentalist Christians, but among New Agers as well.
Hmm.
You know, like I didn't even know, this is this crazy thing, Derrick. I didn't even know being anti-vax was a thing. Like I didn't know that was a thing. Like
Yep.
my dad survived polio, but it left him crippled throughout his life, and he ultimately died from, probably prematurely from um, post-polio syndrome, where his nervous system just kind of shut down and his breathing and all that stuff. And we took the polio vaccine. I remember getting the polio vaccine. I remember getting the
Hmm.
polio vaccine and thinking, so you don't end up with some of the disabilities that your father has, and being grateful for that. So I didn't even know that was a thing until like 3 weeks before the pandemic.
Mm.
Like for whatever reason, like 3 weeks before the pandemic, somebody that I was counseling brought it up, and then some people were like posting shit on Facebook and stuff, and I'm like, wow, this is really a thing, right?
Yeah.
And then it was just mind-blowing to me, mind-boggling to me how much the spiritual crowd did not understand even the scientific even the scientific method. I'm like, where the fuck were you in 8th grade science class? Like, you just check out of that or what?
Yeah.
Like, I don't have a science major. I avoided science because I didn't like math. And so I made, all my degrees are arts degrees, right?
Yeah.
Even even though I'm in behavioral health, it's still a Master of Arts degree. But I still had to take I had to take 2 or 3 research methods and statistics. I mean, it boggled my mind that people didn't know that stuff. It boggled my mind that people could come out and say 5G is causing COVID.
Oh my
And
God.
then 3 weeks later, no, it was a leak in a Wuhan lab, or then 8 weeks later, no, it's just the flu. They're just completely manufactured. It's a psyop. And then and then when we were told to wear masks, and people are like, it's bad for your health, you're gonna pass out from hypoxia or whatever the fuck they
Yeah.
were saying back then. I'm like, you do realize there are like 10-hour surgeries, right? Like, you do. Like, what the hell? And so that left a really bad taste in my mouth with that community, because I couldn't believe they could be so damn stupid and stubborn. And I'm just going to say it like that. Just,
Yeah.
if I'm offending somebody, I'm sorry, but I don't have time. I don't have the mental bandwidth for that, especially tonight. I just don't. So atheism, scientific materialism, that kind of stuff became appealing for that reason. I like swung the pendulum the other way for myself. You know what I was saying? Trying to figure out what was the best course of action for myself and my family and the people I cared about, right? And so and then you were challenging me at that time. You're like, you weren't saying me specifically, but you were saying a lot. If a person hasn't laid atheism on the table, they haven't fully deconstructed.
Yep. And I still stand by that.
Yeah. And so I took that challenge seriously, right?
Yep.
So it was really easy to lean into atheism, scientific materialism, and stuff like that. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because if we talk about feeding the spirit, it's easy to know, well, maybe it's not easy, but I mean, it's easier than it used to be to know how to feed the organic body, right? Like you were talking about. Like, we still put shit in it that we shouldn't. We all know that we do, but imagine, 10,000 years ago or whatever it was, you just anything you find, let's try this berry. Oh shit.
Yeah.
I mean, did they have tasters in the tribes? Like, we found this, you try it first, 24 hours, you're still good. We're feasting, So we've gotten relatively good. I mean, it's kind of obvious what can feed the organic body is the point I'm trying to make. Now, there are going to be some people, I'm sure, that watch this or listen to this that, are going to poo-poo the spiritual side of things. And we've both been on that. I have been on that side of it.
Yep.
But I just, for me, I got to a point where I can't apply the full-on scientific method. I can apply parts of it, but I can't apply the full-on scientific method to extra normal. I used the term supernatural with somebody this week in a conversation, and they got triggered. I don't know why it triggers people, but so I'm trying to think of other ways to say it. But if you compare humanity, and I've said this several times, if you just do a comparison search, right? A belief in some kind of deity is pretty ubiquitous throughout humanity somewhere, whether it was God, goddesses, whatever. So we could say belief in intelligence outside of the material realm and humanity. I'll just say it that way, right? Yep. Pretty ubiquitous. Ghosts or apparitions, pretty ubiquitous. Psychic phenomenon, being able to know things intuitively without any natural, see, there I go, I'm triggering people again, without any physical, I didn't hear it on the phone, you didn't tell it to me, I just intuitively knew these things, or I knew about something, precognition. Pretty universal throughout cultures. Even energy healing, pretty universal throughout cultures. And so I started looking at that and thinking, okay, there's got to be something here. There's got to be something to this. And then I came across really it was Bernardo Kastrup was the first one I came across talking about consciousness as primary, and really dove into his works and then some other people and stuff like that. And so for me, it was like, this is a better explanation of reality.
Yep.
So I would just challenge anybody who is just dead set dogmatic on scientific materialism, matter is all there is. And I get it. I get why, because religion has put so much pressure on you, right? Doesn't it?
Yep.
And so this embracing this idea that there is no God up there keeping score. There is no judgment or punishment in the afterlife. I don't have to live under these crazy, just moral prescriptions that make no sense. Like having to wear a dress, or you can't grow your hair long, or you have to keep it short, or, you showed a kneecap in church and you're causing the brethren to stumble. I mean, or you can't listen to secular music, or you can't watch movies. Just horrible, horrible, horrible moral prescriptions that make absolutely no sense in a society at all. Or who you're sleeping with, as long as it's consensual and among adults, right?
Right.
So I get the liberation of that, and I think it's exciting, and I think it's liberating, and I think it's where a lot of people need to go in their deconstruction. But I agree with you, Derrick. At the end of the day, once that all wears off, you neglect your spirit and you neglect feeding your spirit, it either leads to depression. It just does.
Yeah.
Given a sufficient amount of time.
or anger.
Emptiness.
Like you're just wholesale angry at everything.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm finding is that when you look at people who are perpetually angry, these are people who are in a state of spiritual starvation. They haven't been fed. And this is like you would be more professionally equipped to call this out as a spiritual or as an actual mental diagnosis, but that's just my impression. Because when I see people that are just, they're angry, they're bitter, and if you really double click into their situation, you'll see that there's a high degree of spiritual malnutrition, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about this like from the standpoint of food, right? Because we have like all kinds of different things that we eat. We have organic, natural food, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we have food that has minimal processing. Then we have food that's highly processed, right? And then we have what we call meal replacements. And I want to kind of hang my hat on meal replacements for just a second, because if you go into any weightlifter, bodybuilder, athlete's home,
Right.
you're going to see these whey powder type of things, right? And that is an effective supplement, but you theoretically could sustain yourself on that. But there are a lot of things like you wouldn't get the fiber you need, you wouldn't get certain nutrients, and then you have to supplement in order to make all of that work. And I think that what happens is that when you get into scientific naturalism,
Mm-hmm.
in other words, where that the science is the only thing, I think that falls into that category. Because you will find some things that sustain you, but is it complete? It's not a complete meal.
Mm-hmm.
And you will have to supplement what you're taking in there, right? So if you're into, scientific humanism or scientific materialism, at some point, you're going to find that there is something missing. There's something that's, there's an itch that's not being scratched.
Right.
There's a nook that's not being filled. And I think that that's what happens And let me say this from my own standpoint, because I was once an angry atheist.
No, I don't believe that.
Oh no, I was an angry atheist because, and let me say this from the standpoint. First of all, I believe that religion is harmful.
Hmm.
In honesty, Aaron, I don't believe that any good dwells in religion. You
Hmm.
know, it's like no good religion. Religion is spiritual Nazareth. No good thing comes from Nazareth, right?
Right.
According to our Bibles. So the thing is that what happens, people get caught up in that and they say, okay, this is an effective meal substitute, right?
Hmm.
Then from there you go to like spiritual junk food. And so, you know, we both been down the word of faith path,
Hmm.
you know, the grace path.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that constitutes spiritual junk food. It's something that it fills the bill for right now. It tastes really good right now, but if that's all you're consuming, you're going to get sick because you're not getting any meaningful nutrition from it. It fills the bill. It scratches the itch. It gets it done, right?
Hmm.
Then we get to um, minimally processed food. One of my favorite, Campbell's soup. Campbell's soup. Chicken noodle soup makes you feel good. And there is some benefit to that. You know, they call chicken noodle soup Jewish penicillin, right? There's
Hmm.
some benefit to it, but the process of preparing it and canning it and all of that, there's a lot of salt, there's a lot of it that's not good for you, right?
Right.
So it makes you feel good, but there's a lot of it that's not good for you. And it makes for a good meal, but only for a short term,
Right.
right? And so when you think about modern Christianity, I'm not getting to like anything fundamentalist because I think fundamentalists would fall under the junk food category as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, this is sort of like along the same lines as the meal substitute. In other words, it'll get things done. It'll scratch the itch. It'll give you a little bit of nutrition, but it's not something that you want to eat to sustain yourself.
Hmm.
And last but not least, what's organic? What's organic? And so when I think of what's organic, I think of the stuff that you teach. I think about consciousness. I think about how to quantify the supernatural. In other words, the supernatural is not something that can be quantified using the scientific method, but you can say, okay, if you want to experience this, these are some of the things that you might want to consider in order to open up your receptors in order to receive this. And I think that when you get to the point where you're feeding the spirit without religion, so let me use myself as an example because I got to do this, and a lot of things now nowadays are filtered through the lens of Maya because she feeds my spirit.
Hmm.
I mean, her spirit feeds my spirit. In other words, there's something about our connection that's more than just biology. It's more than just physics. There's something there that gives me a spark internally,
Hmm.
right? And so when I think about this, like if I'm going to work out or if I'm going to run a marathon, there are certain things that I want to eat in preparation of that, and I got to make sure that my body is fueled properly. And so when I'm with her,
Hmm.
I'm filled spiritually. And that's what I want to get at is that there are people, there are places, there are things like, for example, I know people that they take trips regularly to go kayaking, for example.
Right. Right.
And And when they come back from their kayaking trip, they're a totally different person because now they've communed with nature. They've been in the water. They've been disconnected from everything that's material, and they focused in on this nature, and they're different. They're fed spiritually.
Hmm.
And so what I'm getting at is that there are things in your life, like, okay, I'll give you another example. Have you ever seen someone just pick up a guitar and just start playing it?
Hmm.
And you see that, that they may not be the most polished, they may not be the best at it, but you can see that there is something in this exercise where they're disconnecting from the world, right?
Hmm.
They're unplugging. And so every note that they're playing, every every fret, every strum, every pick, they are feeding themselves spiritually. And so these are the things that are organic. And I think that what we need to do, I think that as coaches, as leaders, as teachers, whatever we want to call ourselves, you and I, that
Right.
that what we want to do first of all, first and foremost, is to say, okay, how is your spirit right now? How is your spirit fed? Like, there are some people that read books, and then when they read, there's something that's downloaded into them. There's something that's being that's being birthed in them.
Hmm.
Or some people write books or they write poetry, and you'll see it. It's the same thing. You have to have something, and again, it's not necessarily religious. It's not necessarily anything that's spiritual, but you can see where it feeds the spirit.
Right.
And that's the thing that I want to get at, is like I'm trying to do a comparison and contrasting, a juxtaposition between between feeding the body and feeding the spirit. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
It makes perfect sense to me, and I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. It makes me think of the movie Chariots of Fire, right? What was
Mm-hmm.
the character's name? Eric Little.
Yep.
And there's one point when he's trying to make the decision again. Stupid morality, right? I'm
Yep.
not gonna race in the Olympics because it's on Sunday or it's on a Sabbath or whatever. And he's having a conversation, I think, with his sister. It's been decades since I've seen the movie, but um, he says, "When I run, I feel His pleasure."
Mm.
And deity aside, I think there's a spiritual intoxication that we can feel that's individual to each of us
Yep.
based on what we engage in. It's like, when I run, I feel His pleasure, or you could tell that was feeding the spirit, right? Not a religious activity. I mean, I used to think it was kind of dumb towards the end, not at the beginning, but I used to like harp on this going back even, almost 10 years ago now. Like, spiritual growth in the church was equated, or yeah, spiritual growth, spiritual feeding was equated with with Bible study. You know, how is that spiritual growth? Really? I mean, seriously. Now, if you're a Bible nerd like me or something, you might really get into it, whatever. But because information, knowledge feeds my spirit, it does, no
Yep.
doubt. Um, but realistically, for most people, you're just creating new neural pathways, I guess, if you repeat it enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you repeat the same information enough, you're creating new neural pathways. That's not really the same as what you're talking about or what we're talking about as far as feeding the spirit. And
But
I
but
think
is it? Is it
no,
that you know? I think that, like, when you, if you're able to successfully build a mental map from that, a paradigm,
yeah,
then I think that may be an indicator that your spirit is being fed. I'm just throwing that
yeah,
out
no, yeah, no, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, please push back, on any of that. Um, so it's hard to talk about. Like you were saying, does that make sense? Yes, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But the things you brought up, people, having the right people in your life, having that
Yeah.
connection. There's just some people that you can just feel good being around them. Doesn't matter what you're doing. You just feel more alive when you're with them. You feel more whole when you're with them. That's
Yeah.
feeding your spirit. There's activities that you can engage in, like kayaking or Bible study or whatever, that
Whatever works.
energizes you and lifts you. Like, when you're full, most
Yeah.
people, unless you have some rare condition, which I think one of my Labrador retrievers had in my life. Unless you have some rare condition where your body doesn't tell your brain that you're full, when you've had a good meal,
Yeah.
when you're hungry. And I think one of the things I love about what we do is encouraging people to tap into that and follow that lead. Like, your needs better than anybody else. When you're hungry, when you're thirsty, when you're tired, when you need to get some fresh air, when you need, when you're bored, so you're going to know what feeds your spirit. When you take it outside of a religious context, boy, it just opens up so much.
It really does. And I want to change gears and talk about things
Sure.
that starve you,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, speaking of the experiences of my last 12 months,
Mm-hmm.
I was really at a point of spiritual starvation. And this is the sad part is that when you are physically starved, right? Your body knows that you're starved, but sometimes your mind is a little late in catching it.
Yeah.
And so you'll be in starvation mode. Let me give you an example. This is a true story. This is a true story. When Ducey was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes,
Mm-hmm.
he said that his brain was telling him not to eat.
Mm.
And he's
Yeah.
4 years old.
Yeah.
My
Makes
brain is telling me not to eat. So here he is. He's in a condition where his body is starving. He's wasting. But he said his brain was telling him not to eat. So a lot of times when you're in starvation mode, you may not know it.
It's true. Well, even after 3 days of fasting or whatever, they say the hunger pains go away.
Yeah, it does. No, it's true.
I
It's true.
know.
And I've done like the longest I've fasted is 108 hours.
Okay.
And again, at 3 days, at 72 hours, you're really not aware of you're not eating
Mm-hmm.
anymore. You
Right.
you lose track of whether or not you've eaten or not. And there's some science to that because what happens is you become what's called ketogenic
Mm-hmm.
and fat adaptive. And so instead of looking for carbs in your bloodstream, it's saying, okay, the best energy stores that I have are my fat stores.
Right.
And you start consuming that. And so that's why fasting helps helps with weight loss. But again, there's some psychology to it. And I guess what I'm getting at is that we have to learn how to discern when our body is in a starvation or when our spirit is in a starvation mode, because sometimes like the body will give clear indicators.
Mm-hmm.
The body releases hormones, the body triggers chemicals and all of these different things, but your spirit doesn't have all of that.
Right.
And so the thing that I've learned is that there are things like, for me it was like work. My work life was starving me spiritually. My home life was starving me spiritually. That I the lack of human connection was starving me spiritually, and all these things. And what happened was is that once one of these dominoes fell, and it was the social connection. Once that one fell, then it was like, okay, what I was able to see what's wrong with my home life, and then I'm able to see what's wrong with my work life, and I'm able to adjust each one of these things, and I see, okay, I'm in starvation mode. I'm in flight mode,
Mm.
right? I'm in a bad place. And so in order to do this, I had to figure out, okay, how can I replenish my spirit? So this gets back to like things with you and me, and like you and my sister Sandy, or you or me and Kyle, that people would, when I began to share what I was going through, then people started feeding me.
Mhm.
You started feeding me, Sandy started feeding me, Kyle fed me, right? And so what that did is that gave me strength to see beyond my circumstances. And I tell everybody that that when Maya and I reconnected, it was because I had been spiritually fed. If I had been in starvation mode when I encountered her, I wouldn't have been in a position I wouldn't have been any good to her. In other words,
Right.
but because I began to recognize the areas where I was experiencing malnutrition, where I was experiencing starvation, and I had people who were, okay, here, it's like the whole experience of Elijah in the cave, right? You
Right.
know,
Right.
you got ravens coming to feed you. Okay, so now I can concentrate. I could see beyond my circumstances and say, okay, all right, I understand where I've been sick, where I've been in dis-ease instead of at ease, where I've been malnourished instead of being suitably nourished. And so again, that prepared me. And that's the thing that what I want to say to everybody that's watching is you might be going through a period where your spirit is malnourished. You're
Mm.
not getting the nutrients that you need, and if
Mhm.
that's the case, if you don't have someone who is pouring into you spiritually, to help you get over this hump, that there may be some other blessing. And again, so I just saw Maya, she just chimed in, that if I hadn't gotten over this hump, I would have never we couldn't have had the kind of whole relationship that we have.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so the thing is, I want to say to everybody that's watching, find people. First identify what is feeding you and what is starving you, and when you find what's starving you, you have to first figure out, how can I supplement that.
Mhm.
Find how to supplement that area. Don't wind up in a malnourished situation in any area, because then you're not focused. You know how when you're starving, you're not focused. You're not thinking straight. It's just like how people talk about homelessness. If you're homeless, you can't really focus on anything. You can't focus on finding a job. If you're starving, you can't focus on how to take care of your family, how to relate to people. You're in fight or flight mode. So the first thing you need to do is get out of that. Find out where your area of spiritual malnutrition is, and get fed.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really good stuff. Um, I don't know why my mind went here, but I think for me, one of the things that really fed me, kept me going, was my discovery, and just thinking about and researching and trying to apply and practice what's called a left-hand path in
And
spirituality.
just for everybody that's listening, go back and look at Aaron's teachings on the left hand path, because that helped me. That
Yeah.
really helped me.
So just for people that haven't heard of that, the right-hand path is most of your religions. Christianity is definitely a right-hand path. You can think about it as anything that wants to consume you. So I've been crucified with Christ Friday, right?
Mhm.
Good Friday.
Yep.
It's not
Yep.
I that live, but Christ that lives in me. That's a
Yep.
right-hand path. Almost all of your Hindu paths, Buddhist paths, where there's no self and you're just detaching from everything. You're just trying to consume the ego, get rid of the ego. Those are all right-hand path spiritual paths. And I was on a right-hand path for a really long time. And the left-hand path is more about self-empowerment. It's more about this balance between free will and love, right? Balancing those things.
Yep.
It's about self-actualization. It's the exact opposite of no self from the East. Exact opposite of that.
Yep.
And so then feeding your spirit, for me, becomes part of that. And I was explaining to someone this week, like I had lost so much of myself in Christianity
Mm.
that I had to rebuild an authentic self from scratch. I remember Derrick, just early on in the process, just I think I spent like 4 hours in a grocery store, and this is going to sound crazy to people. And for people that wonder, I did go get evaluated to see if I was professionally, to see if there was something wrong with my brain, or something changing with middle age or whatever. But I went through a grocery store because I was like, what kind of foods do I really like? Like, what do I like? What do I not like? What do I eat because it's socially acceptable? What do I
Mm.
eat because that's what my family fed me? And they said, oh, this was gross, and we don't eat that. I mean, it got that fundamental for me. Going back and exploring music. What kind of music do I really like? What did I internalize because of my social context and trying to fit in when I was younger? And what do I really like? It got that um, basic for me. What activities do I like? Um, what forbidden fruits did I deny myself that I didn't eat from? You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that fed my spirit. I know that sounds crazy, but because of that left-hand path orientation, it's like, okay, I'm going to discover, who is this person? What are my real authentic, like what really feels real and authentic in here? And
Mhm.
then how can I connect it to various different things out here? You and I click, differently than, well, I mean, of everybody that I've met, because again, in 2020, like I was really talking about deconstruction. I was talking about religious trauma. I don't know if anybody back, 2019, 2020 was really talking much about religious trauma.
Yeah.
Um, started the religious trauma page. So I had a lot of people that connected with me. Plus I had a bigger following back then. So I know that was part of it. And most of those people have, moved on to other people and other things. People that I thought, oh, this is my tribe. This is my people, or
Yeah.
whatever. Almost all of them have moved on to other stuff, or I have. But I knew early on, that's why I committed to doing phreology. Like we connected, and phreology for a long time was like,
Yep.
okay, can't wait till Friday. Can't wait to talk to Derrick afterwards. Like
Yep.
that kind of stuff fed my spirit. Because I felt a certain honor. Like you honored me, bro. Like very few people have. I mean, I was listening to a podcast today about, which this would be a good topic for um, phreology, but it was about overcoming insecurities. And
Mm.
I listen to stuff because I want to help clients and stuff too. A lot of it's education for me, but a lot of it's education for clients. I don't consider myself an insecure person. I deal with a lot of insecure persons, and I'm raising 2 boys, right? And so I'm watching this thing, and the guy, he's a bodybuilder, but he just has part of his channel where he just talks about life stuff, right? Not from a professional perspective or anything, but I really like him. I enjoy his content. And he was talking about, having a friend group around you, having people in your life that will just compliment you, that will just edify you, that will just build you up, is really important to have. I mean, they can talk shit, and it was really geared towards young men, young bodybuilder type guys.
Yep.
Um, but you can have, guys relate differently in some ways. especially when you're younger, giving each other shit and practical jokes and all that fun stuff. But having people around you that genuinely, truly see you for who you are and give you genuine compliments and genuinely honor you. And I needed that in my life. And you were there were others, but you
Mhm.
were definitely, near the top of the list, one of the people who genuinely honored me. And so that honor, even through where we've, had disagreements on metaphysical issues or whatever, not even
Yeah.
disagreements, but just dialogue on it, right? There was never, ever a time, not a single time, that honor was violated.
No.
And I got to tell you, Derrick, man, I'm hard pressed to think of another friend that's been like that for me. So that kind of thing, that kind of presence fed my spirit, can feed your spirit.
Well, and that's the thing. So you touch on something that I think is very important, right? That the importance of quote unquote finding your tribe, right? Because there are people that will feed you. They will pour into you over and over again, and they will remind you of how awesome you are, how good you are, how great you are. But let me say this, and here's the thing. We used to preach this too, because I know you preach this, I preach this. You have to have people that know you, KNOW, right? And you have to have people that know NOU, right? That they're able to, to pour into the positive part of you, but they're able to touch the negative parts of you and say, dude, pump your brakes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you've been instrumental to me in that part of my life, because you'll say, okay, Derrick, that's awesome, I love where you're going, and then you're like, okay, I don't know about that one, man. Let's stop and unpack that for a minute. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that. And you've been really good at that. And this is the thing where I consider myself to be truly blessed, truly, truly blessed, because I have people like you and Maya and my sister Sandy and Kyle and Henry and people who are close to me, and they say, "Man, you're on point. You're on fire. I love what you're saying there." And then they also have the license to say, okay, you might be onto something there, but people may not be ready for it in that way, in that construct or that context, and they'll say, okay, pump your brakes, ease up just a little bit, right? And you have to have people that do that, because here's the thing, that people can starve you by feeding you. Let me say that again. People can starve you by feeding you. In other words, if all they're doing is telling you the good about you, all they're doing is you are wonderful, you are great, you're awesome, you cannot fail. Okay, at some point there has to be a critique in there,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise this person is either they are a fan, or they're killing you with kindness. In other words, they're loading so much into your rowboat of self, of ego, right? That your boat begins to sink. And that's no good, because you want to have enough provision for the trip, but you don't want to have so much loaded in that you just begin to sink, where you're overloaded. And so that's where you have to make sure that the people who are in your life, that they are actually feeding you, that they're giving you good nutrition, and they're also giving you that basically they're you've given them license to give you a feedback loop, right? And if you don't do that, again, you wind up getting compliments, compliments, compliments. Oh, you're wonderful, you're great, you're awesome, and there's no, hey, hang on for a second. You wind up starving from being overfed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I have a different I have a little bit different perspective, and it's just a little bit more nuanced, and here's how I would look at it. And I'm gonna use our relationship as an example
Okay.
for this. Um, because I mean, I hear what you're saying. Like, I mean, honestly, if somebody's just blowing smoke up your ass,
Yeah.
telling you how great you are all the time, they want something from you. They're playing you. They want in your wallet, or they want your influence, or they want
Yeah.
something. So they're not actually feeding you with those compliments. They are actually feeding off of you by using those
Mm,
compliments to try to get
okay.
something off of you. That's how
Yeah.
I view it. And I'll tell you why. And I haven't shared this publicly. I've shared it with you, and I shared it in my private group on Facebook. But I some of those people that were in my life, and I can think of one instance in particular that I'll get to. But you got to know, like, and again, coming back to the honor, like, never one time have you challenged me, corrected me, said, "Hey, maybe think about this," that I didn't get fed. Never one time.
Yeah.
But also, never one time that I didn't sense the honor that you had for me and for our relationship. They were
Yeah.
equally parallel.
Yeah. Likewise.
You I don't want people to take away from this. We need people in our lives that criticize us. And here's what I mean by this. Like, I had some people, and
Can
when
can I stop you real quick? Real quick. Critique, not
yeah,
criticize.
yeah.
But keep going.
Well, but here's the thing, we can think, okay, I've got to listen to every jackass that comes into my space because they were my
Nope.
friend. And I had a person that was someone that we promoted on this platform that
Yep.
I promoted. I wanted to see them be successful. I was all for them. Um, and for whatever reason, and I had said, you can, like I would say to you, if you see something, speak into my life, it's fine.
Yep.
But they came into my space with such dishonor that they were literally waterboarding me. And I can think of two instances, two people
Yeah.
who, one was accusing me of being racist and the other one was accusing me of being misogynist.
Yep.
And they were waterboarding me with that stuff.
Fuck. Yeah. I remember that.
And that's not being fed, right? So what I would say is that when you have people in your life and they carry honor for you, and you're feeding off of that honor and that honor for the relationship, they can share things with you, or you can share things with them in a way that feeds them, even if they're wrong, right?
Yep.
Like, there's never one time I came away thinking, oh my God, wow, Derrick really thinks that about me, or oh God, I must be a real piece of shit, or you know what I'm saying? Like, never a single time. And yet, I mean, hell, even the atheist thing, right? Going back to that, it's like, okay,
Yep.
you're right. You like, it would have been real easy to just get defensive and argue, you're just going down that atheist route, or,
Yep.
however those conversations go. But I was like, okay, get off the phone with you or whatever, be like, okay, I'm going to face this squarely. I'm going to look this squarely in the face and see where the evidence leads me and that kind of stuff. And that's why I brought up earlier, like, the evidence of comparing people's testimonies of their experiences validated my own previous experiences. See what I'm saying?
Yep.
But I was able to get there and be intellectually honest and not defensive because of your influence and input in my life. But it's because you were feeding me the entire time, not waterboarding me.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep. I get it. I'm right there with you. And that's a good analogy. Like the difference between feeding you and waterboarding you, because like basically waterboarding is a tool to get an individual to submit,
Yep.
right? But when you're feeding, you're like, okay, I want to give you the nutrition that you need to share something with the world and possibly me that I think is relevant. And here's you that's a really good comparison because people may not see this, but like, okay, if you give someone a glass of water you give them something cool and refreshing that cleanses their palate, that moistens their throat and their nasal passages, and it's wonderful, right? But waterboarding, you're using the same water to
Right.
to basically beat them down,
Right.
right? It's the same thing, and probably even in the same quantity. But one is used to like for sustenance, and the other one is used to break someone's spirit. And so let's talk about that for a second, because when we
Yeah.
talk about spiritual starvation, I think that a lot of times it may not be spiritual starvation, it may be spiritual breaking. In other words,
Yeah.
you're giving someone so much of something with the intention of breaking them emotionally,
Yep.
breaking them spiritually. So that, because here, this is the thing, that when you get to someone to the point of spiritual breakage, when you get them to the point where they're spiritually broken, this is where you're able to manipulate and control them,
Right.
right? And we've talked about this on the show before. This is how pimps get prostitutes to do things for them. They
Right.
break their spirit. And once the spirit is broken, now there's a high degree of suggestibility.
Right.
And so, sometimes it's not starvation. Sometimes, again, it's giving them more of what they think they want than they actually need.
Right. Or what
So
you think they want that they don't actually need.
they don't exactly, man. Exactly.
No, I mean that's a good point. And life can. I really do think you were mentioning depression earlier. I do think, as a mental health professional, that most depression is based on some external cause that broke someone's spirit
Yeah.
somewhere down the road or along the way. I really do think that. I think there are cases where it's just the brain isn't functioning correctly, but I think those are pretty rare.
Yeah.
I think in most cases, people have a damn good reason for feeling depressed, and it usually goes back to some some asshole or a group of assholes in their life, or just an unfortunate set of circumstances or whatever that broke their spirit. That if you think about, you define spirit at the beginning as the I don't remember exactly how you said it, but I would say it the spark of consciousness, universal consciousness that's in all of us. And you can get to a point where people, circumstances, life situations can just shut that down in you and break that. I think that's a really good point to make. So it's not just starvation, it can also be spiritual brokenness.
So you mentioned something, and I want to spend a few minutes to unpack this. You talked about trauma, right?
Hmm.
And so how does trauma, feed into spiritual starvation, or causing spiritual disease? Because I want to talk about that, because again, we're talking about feeding the spirit versus starving the spirit, but I think that trauma holds a special place
Hmm.
in this discussion, because trauma does something that may not be either feeding or starving,
Hmm.
but it does cause a disease.
Sure.
So, and this is something that you've spent a lot of time in,
Mhm.
cultivated a lot of it. So I think that you have some really keen insights that you could share with the audience about that.
Yeah, so trauma is an interesting thing, because most people think, when they think about trauma, they think about the event that happens outside of them. They think about the event that happens external to them.
Yeah.
So, and I can tell you, I've talked to hundreds of clients that really are suffering from trauma, but because their event it wasn't as dramatic as a soldier on the battlefield that watched his buddy die, or I wasn't, raped or sexually abused repeatedly, or I wasn't held at gunpoint, or I didn't have my life threatened, that kind of stuff. But trauma is completely an inside thing. It's totally an internal thing, and there can be what I would call micro traumas that build up over time. So, in other words, if you're living with someone who's constantly criticizing you and making you feel bad about yourself, that may not be the same as a soldier coming back from the battlefield, but it can actually be more degrading to the soul over time because
Mm.
of the way you internalize the messages and stuff like that. And what really makes something traumatic is when you don't know what to do with it. You don't know where to go with it. So, for example, I would say that the experience that I had that awakened me and started me on my deconstruction, which is, uh, I'm in meditation, and it just mind blowing thing. I don't go into all of it. I've done it before, but I just, I have this experience, and then all of a sudden I realize, wow, everything I've been doing my whole life is bullshit. Or a
Listen,
lot of it is, it's based on a lot of bullshit.
listen.
And while that was necessary to move me forward, it was also a very traumatic experience. And one of the things that made it traumatic, Derrick, was I didn't have anybody I could go to talk about it.
Mm.
I didn't have anybody I could go to that would hold space for me and just say, yeah, Aaron, that really sucks. Wow, or give me a different kind of perspective. It's one of the reasons I got into therapy.
Mhm.
But then at some point, even one of my therapists was not holding space for me anymore. But so I would say here, and here's how I would connect it to spirit. So I would say trauma is any emotionally difficult situation, anything that we find emotionally difficult, especially if we feel alone in it, especially if we feel like we have nowhere to go with it. So this is why family therapists say family system is only as sick as its secrets,
Mm.
because we don't have anybody to go to with this or with this situation. And so what that creates inside of us is it creates a burden that we try to psychologically and mentally vacate from in various different ways. So some people will choose compulsive behaviors to vacate from that. Some people will choose substance abuse to vacate from that. Some people will almost just check out. It's called dissociation, where they just space out and just zone out. This is the person, we all do this, but this is the person who, because of the trauma, when they're driving, they go into a trance, and all they're thinking about is negativity, and they can't remember how they got home. They're not present. They're not awake. They're not
Yep.
mindful to what they're doing. They enter the room. Sometimes this is just age, right? You enter a room and you forget what you went into the room for. But people
Mhm.
that are walking around with trauma, this frequently happens to them. And they can often frequently be diagnosed as ADHD or ADD because they can't keep their attention on what's going on around them. Well, that's because they vacated, right? So if
Yeah.
you vacate, you're not aware then of what's really going on with you. You're not connected to your spirit. You're not, you see what I'm saying? So it's like there's a breach.
Yep.
So even if you wanted to feed your spirit, you can't feed your spirit because you're too dissociated from yourself. And the biggest thing is you haven't had anywhere to expel that burden with someone else that can help you process it in a space where they're holding unconditional positive regard for you. Does that make sense?
Yep. That makes perfect sense. And this, and again, for everyone that's watching, you have to cultivate these relationships where you can find that safe space. That you where you can talk to someone and be transparent and be mindful and be present and share this experience in its raw state, right? Where you're not going to get judged for it. And again, Aaron, as my friend and brother, this is something that I honor about you, is that you've been that safe space for me. So I can come to you and I can share things with you, and there's no judgment. There's no, preconceived notions about what you think about what I'm thinking or what I'm doing. You're looking at this in, you know, as it is, and you're saying, okay, based on what I know about your situation, about who you are, this is what I think, where I think that you should go. And I think that cultivating these relationships, I think that when you start talking about spiritual feeding versus spiritual starvation, and let me say this again, I'm using myself as an example because I had so many people in my life who they were feeding from me.
Right.
They're taking, but they're not giving.
Right.
And so what I had to do is I had to find the people who were feeding me, the people who were pouring into my spirit, the people who were they were looking at me holistically and saying, okay, I see a deficit. I see something where you're struggling. I see something where you're incomplete. Let me step in and help you, right? So you, like, again, you've been that for me. Maya's been that for me. My sister Sandy, Kyle, Henry. I could think of a lot of people. My friend Tony Calloway is another one.
Mhm.
There are people who have stepped in and said, okay, I see what you're going through. You know, I see you're struggling, and and here's a lifeline. You know, and that's the thing. You have, okay, people people could throw you either a lifeline, Aaron, or they could throw you an anchor.
Yeah.
And that's what I've learned. You know, and there's substance to both of them, but only one of them
Depends on the
is gonna
context,
help
right?
you hang in there.
It depends on the context, right?
Yeah.
If you're drowning and I throw you an anchor instead of a buoy,
Yeah. I'm gonna die.
and that's true. We do that. We do that to each other, right? Like, I mean, just as human beings. So funny. One thing I would say, and this is really off topic. I don't know why I'm saying this, but um, we have to be conscientious about being fixers for other people, or how many fixers we let into our life.
Yes.
Because again, resolving trauma is more about just having some place to go with it, not necessarily. So if somebody is just trying to fix you all the time, they might be throwing you an anchor
Yeah.
when you really need a buoy, right? And
Yep.
and this is coming from a professional fixer, a recovering fixer, right? um because there's judgment behind it.
Yeah.
There is judgment behind it. And so I love, how you put that, like at the end of the day, I try to always keep this in mind. Like it's your life. At the end of the day, whoever I encounter, even if it's my kids who I see every day and I play a very significant role in their life, it's still their life. They still have to live with their choices. I had to learn early on as a parent, okay, if you don't want to listen, life will teach you,
Yeah.
about some of the basics. But you have to hold those boundaries in that space that, like, I think this would be a good path for you based on what you're sharing with me and what I know of you. But at the end of the day, it's your decision, it's your call, and not take it personally. Like, it's crazy to me how personally people take it if you don't follow their advice, or if you don't, like you said, give the confession that they want. That was such a great way to bring out that analogy. It's like, I want you to see this about yourself, and I'm going to waterboard you over it until you confess that you see it the same way I see it.
Hmm.
um, or even if it's a good thing, like you could look at somebody and you could know option A, good, option B, terrible.
Yep.
I think you should pick option A. And then they go and pick option B. And if your ego's too connected to that, or you don't have good boundaries, you're gonna be like, well, I tried to tell you, like if they would have just listened to me, they wouldn't be in this. That's kind of bullshit that we do. But
Yeah.
that, at the end of the day, okay, you chose option B. All right, well, that sucks for you because now you see where you're at.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you get to choose, right? And I think a symptom of a broken spirit is when we cannot honor our own choices and circumstances in life. And here's what I mean by that. I want to solicit advice from people that I trust, that I know honor me, that know what they're talking about.
Yep.
But I am always mindful. At the end of the day, that's just a data point.
Yeah.
I'm responsible for the decision that I make. I'm responsible for the path that I choose. And I'm going to choose this path or make this decision with intention, knowing that it's coming from me and there's nobody else to blame. I shouldn't
Yep.
listen to that guy. I mean, we all go through that. But I think that's healthy, right? That's healthy.
Yep.
That's when your spirit is strong. I think that's one of the indicators that you've been feeding your spirit. So I just throw that out there.
Well, I was thinking about this as you were saying this, that I've this is like one of my life's maxims, that there are two kinds of people in the world: artists and mechanics, right? And the artist sees the beauty in everything. It can be broken, it can be misshapen, but the artist finds the beauty in it. Mechanic
Mhm.
seeks to fix everything.
Yep.
Everything, everything is, everything is a nail, and the art and the mechanic is a hammer,
Yep.
right? And so I think that in order to be truly useful to our fellow humans, is that we have to find the balance between artists and mechanics.
Yeah.
So I think about this like there's this Japanese art where they take pottery
Yeah.
and they break it and then they fuse it back together with gold,
Yep.
right? And I don't know what that's called.
I can't
And
remember. I used to preach that, but
I
yeah.
know I used to preach this one too. Um, but basically the person that's fusing the pieces back together, they are the balance. They live on the balance of the artist and the mechanic. They see
Mm.
the beauty in what's broken and they apply something to fix the broken parts.
Mhm.
And I think that when we talk about you know people that feed you spiritually, you need to find people that understand that balance, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have people in your life that they're just mechanics and they look at you as broken and they say, okay, here's what you need to do to fix you. Well, I think that in a lot of cases, if you don't really understand the mechanics of things, even though someone is giving you the instruction, you're not capable of receiving it. And then the flip side of it is, if all they do is they say, okay, well, you're beautiful just as you are. Well, sometimes we're fucked up. you know,
Right.
sometimes we have a legitimate problem that needs to be fixed, that needs to be addressed. And if they're just, looking at you and say, oh, well, you're beautiful in your brokenness. Well, not exactly, right?
Yeah. That's a good point.
So, basically let me just say this to kind of wrap this up, and then I'll kick it over to you for closing. But I'm when I look at people who feed my spirit,
Mhm.
that they give me nutrients, they give me something, that a texture or a taste that I like, that helps me to overcome the challenges that I face, right?
Mhm.
And again, like I said, I have. Let me say this: I have my circle of friends, people that I know, which that number is in the thousands, right? And
Mhm.
then I have my inner circle, which there may be a couple of hundred in there. You
Mhm.
know, these are people who I respect their counsel. I respect what they say, and what they say helps me. But then I have my dot, and my dot is like, people that I can count on the fingers, all of my fingers, and have some change, right?
Right.
And these are the people that are going to say not just the good things, but they're gonna look at things and they're gonna be like, nah, dog, that one's fucked up. you
Yeah.
know and
Yeah.
and but they have the license to tell you that. And so let, let me give you another example, right?
Mhm.
I am a potato salad and coleslaw snob.
Okay. I'm with you.
That when people, you're at a picnic, you want to say, who made the potato salad or who made the coleslaw? Because I'm not just eating everybody's potato salad or everybody's coleslaw. Because
Yeah.
some people, they think they can, but they really can't. They will fuck up some potato salad or they'll
Yeah.
fuck up
It's
the
easy to do.
coleslaw.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is a question that I ask when I go to any picnic. Who made the potato salad?
Yeah.
Who made the coleslaw? What I'm getting at is not everybody they might produce something that has some nutritional value, but it doesn't resonate with you.
Right.
And so when I look at people who are, because here's the thing, people give advice like they fart. you know, Everybody farts. And some people's farts are worse than others. You know, but when you talk about advice, some people give advice and it's good advice, and some people give advice and it's bullshit. And you have to develop a filter to say, okay, this is feeding me or
Yeah.
this is potentially starving me.
Yeah.
And so I've learned how to discern between the two, because it got to a point, like I said, in the last year, it got to the point where it was critical. There were people who I thought should be feeding me that were absolutely starving me. They were absolutely killing me, right? And and then there were people who were, they're pouring into my life. They're giving me substance. They're giving me nutrition. They're feeding me in the cave like Elijah, and I'm better. I'm better. So I've learned to discern between the two, and so it goes back to potato salad. Who made this potato salad? who made
That's funny.
there's somebody that made a meme. They made a video. It was like a black affirmation, right?
Uh-huh.
You know, who made the potato salad? Who made the potato salad? And it was
I've eaten
like,
some bad potato salad in my life, so I'm with you. Maybe not so much the coleslaw, but I'm with you.
coleslaw too, because here's the thing: not everybody can make coleslaw. Let me just say this, right? For everybody that's watching, if you make coleslaw with Miracle Whip, you are a fucked up human being.
Dude, I don't know. I don't My white culture, we didn't eat coleslaw. The only coleslaw I ever had was Kentucky Fried Chicken. True story. And I
but,
like it.
but but KFC is actually decent coleslaw,
Yeah, I like
because
it.
they make it with buttermilk, and they make
Mm.
it with mayonnaise, and they make it with spices, and that's the way to make it. It's like Miracle Whip is the fucking shortcut to coleslaw, and when you taste it, you're like, whew. So the same thing, that when someone's feeding you spiritually, if they're feeding you spiritual Miracle Whip, fuck that, man, kick it to the curb. That's what I'm getting at. So I'll leave it with
Oh,
you to
love it.
close it up, man.
I think so. To sum it up for people, because we were kind of all over the board, but hopefully it was beneficial for people. But you said something. What resonates with you,
Yep.
and I think that's the key. What resonates with you? What do you vibe with? Um, trust that, let that feed you and get more of that. Like, it's not hard, you know what resonates with you, what uplifts you, what inspires you, inspirits you. Do more of that, get more of that, get around people that are more
Yes.
like that,
Yes.
and get away from sort of the energy vampires that are just sucking off of you, but not giving anything back in a
Yes.
reciprocal way in the relationship as much as you can. Everybody's situation is different, but yeah, that's what I would say. You want to feed your spirit, find out what you resonate with, find out what you vibe with, and go with that.
Yep. Exactly. That's it.
Yeah. All right.
Another good talk, man.
I enjoyed it. I got fed.
I did too. I did too. Absolutely. And that's the whole point. Find those people who feed you and get
Yes.
fed. And those who drain you, the spiritual vampires, kick them to the curb. Don't fuck around with that.
Yep.
And you'll find that for the most part you'll live in the area of the sweet spot of happiness in your life.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming to our TED Talk. And watch out. Remember, always remember who made the potato salad and who made the coleslaw. Very important advice.
Who made the coleslaw? All right, love you, Aaron.
Love you too, man.
All right.